For 3,000 years, a single tree outperformed wheat, thriving in deserts where nothing else survived, feeding entire civilizations without asking for water, plowing, or fertilizer. Its fruit was once so vital that ancient tombs and merchant ships depended on it. Today, planting this tree is illegal in most places, not because it's toxic, but because it's free. So what happened to the world's most generous crop? And who decided abundance was a threat? The answers begin in an Egyptian tomb, with pods left for eternity. Inside the tombs of ancient Egypt, archaeologists have found carob pods resting alongside the bodies of the dead, a food offering meant to last for eternity. These pods, carbon dated to nearly 4,000 years ago, were placed with care beside grains and dates, a quiet testament to their value. The carob tree was not just a crop, it was a promise that hunger could be held at bay, even in the afterlife. But the story of carob does not end in the desert silence of a burial chamber. Its journey continued across the open water. Long before the Greeks or Romans wrote about it, Phoenician sailors packed carob pods into their ships as they traced the coastlines of the Mediterranean. For traders, the carob was more than food, it was insurance. The pods did not rot. They could be stored for years, surviving heat and salt air, ready if a voyage went wrong or a port was closed by siege. Archaeobotanists have traced carob seeds from Levantine origins to the farthest Western Isles, mapping its spread along ancient sea routes. Whenever a new colony was founded, carob trees followed, planted on rocky slopes above harbors, waiting for the next crisis. In this way, one tree's resilience became a lifeline for generations of seafarers and settlers. The evidence is there in the layers of shipwrecks and settlement middens, a lineage of survival unbroken from the Bronze Age to the classical world, carried pod by pod across the water. The first written records of carob appear in the texts of Theophrastus, who described the tree's fruit as Caratian, sweet, sturdy, and reliable. Dioscorides, the physician and botanist, praised carob pods for settling the stomach and soothing a sore throat. But these ancient authors were not writing about an exotic rarity. They were describing a fixture of daily life, as familiar as bread or cheese. In kitchens from Athens to Alexandria, carob pods were ground into flour. The flour was mixed with barley or wheat and baked into dense loaves that kept for weeks. When sugar was scarce or unknown, families boiled the pods to make a thick, dark syrup. This syrup sweetened porridge, preserved fruit, and filled pastries long before cane sugar reached the Mediterranean. Children chewed raw pods as a treat, savoring the honeyed pulp. Livestock, goats, donkeys, even camels, thrived on the tough, fibrous remains. Carob's value extended beyond the pantry. Its seeds, nearly identical in weight at about 200 milligrams each, became the standard for measuring gold and gemstones. For centuries, merchants and jewelers across the Mediterranean balanced scales with carob seeds, Caratian in Greek, carat in English. This tiny, unassuming seed set the standard for preciousness, from the markets of Byzantium to the workshops of Venice. A single tree could supply food, feed, and a unit of measure. In everyday life, carob was woven into the fabric of household survival and commerce. It was not just a backup for hard times, but a quiet partner in the ordinary rhythms of work, trade, and family meals. As new crops arrived from across the oceans, maize from the Americas, sugarcane from the tropics, the arithmetic of farming changed. Wheat and barley had always been counted, measured, and taxed at harvest. But sugarcane, with its annual cycle and steady yield, offered something even more attractive to the state: predictability. With each new season, officials could tally the fields, estimate the output, and levy taxes accordingly. This regularity became the backbone of public finance. Annual crops meant annual revenue, a fixed calendar for collecting dues, and a clear picture of who owed what. Merchants and fiscal officers built their fortunes on this cycle. Grain was stored in central granaries. Sugar and maize were processed and shipped in bulk. Their value tracked from field to market. The more inputs a crop required, seeds, fertilizer, irrigation, the more points of sale and taxation appeared along the way. Every transaction, every delivery, generated receipts and records, each one a chance to collect a fee or a tax. Trees like carob, growing quietly on communal hillsides or unclaimed land, produced food outside this system. No receipts, no rent, no reliable way to measure or tax the harvest. In a world increasingly organized by ledgers and markets, this was a problem not of agriculture, but of accounting. By the late 19th century, the fate of the carob tree was being decided not in orchards or kitchens, but in offices lined with ledgers and survey maps. Across southern Europe and colonial North Africa, bureaucrats began to redraw the boundaries of value on paper. Cadastral codes, those official registers that determined what land was worth and who owed what, sorted crops into strict hierarchies. Wheat fields, vineyards, and olive groves were listed as principal or productive. Carob, if it appeared at all, was relegated to the columns marked minor, secondary, or simply fodder. Italian land regulations from the 1880s grouped carob under culture minore, a category that carried lower tax assessments and fewer rights to state support. Spanish forestry manuals, revised after the Ley de Montes, described carob as suitable only for poor soils and unworthy of improvement grants. In French Algeria, colonial tax codes treated hillsides dotted with carob as bois sans valeur, meaning woods without value, eligible for clearance or replanting with taxable crops. These classifications were not just words. They shaped who could plant, who could harvest, and what counted in the eyes of the state. Landowners petitioned to have their carob groves reclassified for better rates, but the paperwork rarely favored them. Once consigned to the margins in cadastral records, carob became invisible to subsidy programs and improvement schemes. The tree that had fed villages for centuries was now, on paper, almost worthless. In the hills of Crete, elders still recall the years when carob trees meant the difference between hunger and survival. During the Second World War, as German occupation cut off supply lines and wheat vanished from village storerooms, families turned to the trees that stood, untended, on the edges of their land. Children were sent out at dawn to gather pods, sometimes risking patrols, always watched by neighbors who understood the need for secrecy. The pods were ground into coarse flour, mixed with scraps of barley or chestnut, and baked into loaves dense enough to last a week. Carob syrup, boiled down in battered pots, replaced sugar in tea and sweetened what little fruit could be found. In Sicily, stories passed down from grandparents describe sacks of pods hidden beneath floorboards, rationed out in handfuls to stave off the worst days. Spanish families, caught in the chaos of civil war, relied on the same dark pods to quiet the ache of empty stomachs. These memories are not nostalgia, they are proof. When the world outside collapsed, it was the old trees, ignored by officials and left uncounted in ledgers, that kept villages alive. The carob endures in memory not as a symbol, but as a lifeline. Soil scientists in Sicily and Andalusia have measured a steady rise in organic carbon under century-old carob groves, up to 25% more than in nearby fields. In plots that receive less than 300 millimeters of rain a year, carob trees still add 2 to 5 tons of organic matter per hectare over decades. Agronomists point to this as proof carob does not just survive on the margins, it repairs the land around it. Yet, across the European Union, carob is classified as an underutilized fruit tree. It is listed for conservation, not for large-scale planting. Subsidies flow to annual crops, wheat, maize, oilseeds, while carob remains outside the main support schemes. In Australia and parts of California, Local ordinances sometimes list carob as a restricted or even invasive species, banning new plantings in certain areas to protect native ecosystems. In practice, the rules do not target the tree for what it does, but for what it represents: food that grows without purchase, without contracts, without profit. The economic logic is simple. A tree that feeds people for free every year for a century is a poor business model. The paradox is clear. Science shows the benefits. Policy builds barriers. The question is not whether carob works. It is whether abundance without a price tag has a place in the world we have built. Today, nearly 2 billion people live in regions threatened by drought and soil loss. The carob tree still grows, uncultivated, resilient, and largely ignored. The real scarcity isn't food, it's permission to flourish without profit. Sometimes, the future depends on what we're willing to let grow wild. Share your thoughts below.